Welcome to the Time of the Reason podcast show. We're not looking for ratings. We are not here to support and to create sensationalism. We are not here to entertain. We are here to give due diligence to the pressing human, economic, environmental, political, and social issues that affect humankind. We are here to promote thinking. Now, more than ever, is the time to revive reason. Unless we do so, humankind is riding a one-way runaway train into oblivion. Think about it. We must think. Thank you for listening again to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Let's get started. Well, welcome back to another episode of Time of the Reason podcast. With my co-host Dan Ploger. We're here to talk about an interesting subject. We're titling this episode "Apocalypse How: Survival or Thrival," and I'll preface it very quickly. We're living in the digital age of social media and mainstream media, and we're inundated with stories and sensational narratives that somehow or that say that we're in the end times. And this is it. Never before have we been here before. And, Jesus is coming back, or, we're on the brink of a nuclear war. And what we'd like to do is just talk about it, maybe calm people down, and give you some tips on how you can thrive during this time rather than thinking about all the worst things that can happen. What do you think about that subject, Dan?
Wow. Okay, that's good. I'm ready. Let's go, John.
Yeah, and what is it you were talking about one time? Maslow's hierarchy about the
Yeah.
needs of human beings, and at a very basic or at a very foundational level, isn't that food, water, and shelter?
Yeah. Security is your most fundamental need, as I recall, and it goes up the steps to where you become a more and more advanced spirit, if you will, till finally you reach the pinnacle, which is called self-actualization. That's when you have become a Buddha. That's when you have achieved spiritual wholeness. And so that's Maslow was the scientist name that put that forward, and it's one that I've referred back to most of my life.
Yeah, and for good reason too. I think a lot of these stories and a lot of these narratives that we see each and every day, we're being bombarded 24/7, 365. There's a reason behind those. It's not always just on face value. And people have gotten into, a lot of people that I've talked to have actually gotten into a survival mode. If it does happen, or, if there is a global nuclear event that, oh my gosh, we got to be ready. It's all about survival. But I think for the sake of this conversation, and we've talked about this before, Dan, is why not think in terms of how do you thrive in a post-apocalyptic world, or in a world that is like right now. I mean, you can't flip on a social media platform and see just human beings doing and saying some of the stupidest things that I've ever seen in my adult life. Even as a child, I don't remember ever being this goofy. And then you talk to the people that develop these platforms, and they've written books about it, that it's all about the content, or it's all about the looks, the likes, the views, and
Yeah.
and who watches that platform than others. And Dan, it's kind of insane out there right now, some of the stuff that we're witnessing people doing. I mean, have human beings lost their ability in general and rhetorically to critically think?
Well, I think there's yes, in a lot of cases. I think what we're producing out of college, I'd say just about anyone coming out of a college, and particularly amid an Ivy League college, you need to just somewhere have a place where you can check in and unload, offload everything you learned at college into a wastebasket and clean your thoughts and reload your brain. There's no hope for most of these people to stand up and support uh, anti-Semitic causes. It's just, besides being absolutely foolish, is is it's unhuman. It's if you espouse the elimination, the liquidation of your enemy, that puts you in a very special category of uh, of aggressor.
Yeah, and it's a psychological game at that point. You know, the hoodwinked is not as being transparent is what I should say. You know, we talked about, you know, wow, if I only knew then what I know now, life would be much different. So I was watching a TikTok or something of a young person who had just graduated from one of those Ivy League schools, and she was talking about this great marketing degree she got. I'm not going to talk about what school it was, but it was Ivy League, and how she can't get a job because all the jobs at the higher levels are taken. You know, I can't walk into this $200,000 a year job and by God, I got a marketing degree from one of the best places on the planet. And she just was in tears. And I'm thinking to myself, well, the people in those positions have earned that position. You don't just come out of college and expect to be an executive vice president. I mean, that's not how that works. And so she was dissing the whole system, the capitalist system. And here's a person who I would, she's an American for sure. And did she become an enemy to common sense? And is she just intellectually lazy and doesn't understand the scientific method or what due diligence is? How can you get an Ivy League degree and come out of school and act like that, which supports the point you make?
Yeah, yeah. It's I the universities are diligently trying to make themselves obsolete. And again, I'll go back to my lifelong experience about Marxists and socialists is that they cannot run a capitalist organization. Anytime you give them the keys to a capitalist organization, they're going to drive it into the ground because they don't understand the basic concepts and desire to provide customer value to your customers. And they don't understand and appreciate the value of customers. So,
Which are the students, by the way. Students go to school to learn. They don't go to school and also to learn skill sets that can help them so they're not crying like a wailing baby because they didn't get the vice president position. But
gee,
they don't go there to get taught ideology, which is what those communists and socialists have been doing for a few decades now, and it's all coming to light.
well, I'll speak as a past business owner myself. The last thing I want on my payroll are uh, people like that are driven by ideology, not interested. Just, I haven't got time. I'm too busy solving the problems that automatically come up from day to day living in the world of business, addressing competition, addressing pressure to produce new and innovative products to increase the amount of customer value that I'm delivering to the customer each time we have a trade.
Great points. You know, when I think about, you know, some of the tips that we could offer here in a short little conversation would be, the first would be something that everybody needs to learn in college for sure, is the concept of due diligence, which means to take this information that's out there that's espousing all of these negative things to put you in a fear state, and stay informed. Learn what the facts are. Search for the truth. Don't be lazy and just follow the crowd. Oh, that's another thing, the individual thought thing. You would think when you come out of college, you wouldn't be doing a dead end to make fun of all the dead Jews who were just massacred by Hamas. You would do something better with your intelligence. And then what you just said, which I think is really important, and this girl that was crying, this could have really, rather than being a crybaby, which has no value to a business owner or corporation, especially if you're in marketing, but determine what your value is. Okay, so you have a marketing degree, and that's great, but sell yourself. You will never get a job going to an interview and crying with the person that's interviewing.
Yeah, and that
And
first thing out of your mouth is, how much vacation do I get, or how much paid time off? There's a turn on.
Yeah, let me think about this. Guy leaves, lady leaves, comes back. Our position's been filled. This interview's over, right?
Yeah.
So determine what your value is. If you're going to go work for somebody, keep in mind that you're probably not going to get hired on as a co-owner of the company or as a higher level executive just because you went to an Ivy League school. You have to earn your way. Oh, that's what, work ethic? We see a lot of that these days in some of the younger generation. And we're not saying that everybody in that generation doesn't know how to work. I bet you can find some great kids out in Texas or Montana that have been working on their parents' farm since they were knee high to a grasshopper. So when they go and get an education, they know how to put it to work for them because they have the work ethic. They didn't just have shit handed to them their whole lives and think they're somebody special because they have an Ivy League degree, which makes them somehow more intelligent than the owner of a corporation.
Or they never quite developed the courage it took to ride the school bus.
That's a good point. Or when they did get involved in something, they wanted to make sure that when they came in last place, at least they participated, right?
I got something for it.
I got a blue ribbon for that principle that whose school is failing, right?
Yeah.
What I see the other day, this has got to take the cake, and this leads into another subject. But there was a school district in New Jersey where the superintendent decided that he was going to cancel Halloween festivities leading up to Halloween because somehow it was racist and may offend somebody's religion or skin color. And basically did it unilaterally with some advice from a company that does DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has its roots in critical race theory. Of course, I'm digressing here, but that's another one of those things where you have to use some good old common sense and some due diligence skills to figure out what's really going on.
And you have to have the courage to recognize something that's false for what it is. Ibram Kendi, how anybody could support the idea of the way we're going to beat racism is through more racism. If you can just buy that argument, you are in a very special category.
You get a blue ribbon. Good luck with that one. So, so rather than being in a survival mode and in fear all the time, apocalypse how will you survive the apocalypse in your own mind? And it's through the scientific method, due diligence, being intellectually not lazy, and finding out the facts and the truths for yourself, and then figuring out your own value. We just said about that. Then making the decision about how or what your place is going to be in society. Are you just going to take, and become those people who add no value other than an example of how not to be, or are you going to give?
That live to maintain the system. What an awful, awful avocation. What do you exist for, Dan Ploger? I exist to maintain the system. Ooh.
Wow. And I'm going to give you a blue ribbon next time I see you. So think about this. Next time you're all hot and bothered and you think it's the end of the world or the end of your world as you know it, think about it as an opportunity to thrive. Use some of those tips that Dan and I just talked about. And instead of just surviving, become a giver to humanity and learn how to thrive. Because if enough people start thriving and start giving due diligence and start a work ethic and realize their place in society is to add value, then we could get through any apocalypse. I don't think it's the end of the human race as we know it, but my gosh, if we don't get in the race for critical thinking, then we got some darker days ahead. I like to think we've got light ahead. So, any final thoughts, Dan?
No, we pretty well covered it, John. Again, thanks for such a thought-provoking subject.
And likewise, thanks for being here, and thank you for listening, Dan and me here on the Time of the Reason podcast, because it is the time of the reason. And if you use your mind, we can thrive. Thank you. Talk to you again soon, Dan.
Go Thrival.
Go Thrive. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Now it's time to think. Logic and reason work. It's only common sense. Do your part.